This episode of WDW Today is being sponsored by All-Star Vacation Homes. And, you're planning your perfect trip to Walt Disney World, and you're looking at all these great things coming up, like Summer Nightastic and a lot of the other activities that Disney's got planned for not only the summertime, but also in the fall and in the wintertime. And you're planning all these great things, and you're saying to yourself, I love going to Walt Disney World, but man, I really wish there was more space in our hotel room because I really can't afford to spend a lot for our hotel, but I want a lot of space. I don't want to feel cramped. Great news. All-Star Vacation Homes is the perfect solution for you. You're going to get literally a house with lots of great amenities with a huge amount of space for a fraction of the cost that it would cost to get something like that at Walt Disney World. Check them out online at www.allstarvacationhomes.com.
This is Walt Disney World Today. Give us 5 minutes and we'll give you the world.
It's Friday, May 14th, 2010, and this is episode 720 of WDW Today. I'm Matt Hochberg of StudioCentral.com. Joining me on today's show is Len Testa, co-author of The Unofficial Guide to Walt Disney World. Welcome to the show, Len.
Thanks, Matt. I'm a bit sad today.
Oh, why is that?
Because now that Disney's announced its new Art of Animation studio suites and Inn,
yes,
to take over the second half of Pop Century, I'm a bit sad because we will never see a bar named after a Prohibition-era speakeasy. We'll never see a restaurant named the Bomb Shelter. We'll never see words up on the outside the hotel like Bully Pulpit. Or Dewey Defeats Truman. I love that. I love the idea, and it's.
You already had those pages written, huh, Len?
I know. My coverage. Actually, it's funny. It's kind of funny, but I was. I posted a note on Facebook about this, and our Facebook fans just came up with all these crazy ideas. I'm like, if Disney would have had this 5 years ago, they totally could have built this thing, and it would have worked. But they didn't do it. So thanks to all of our Facebook fans out there.
Lots of great possible jokes ruined.
Dewey Defeats Truman. I think it's classic. But you think about it, right? I mean, one reason why the other half of Pop Century never would have worked was. There's a Great Depression, an influenza epidemic, and 2 world wars, plus the Great Depression. There's nothing to celebrate in the first 50 years of the 20th century. It's essentially ridding ourselves of pestilence and fascists. I mean, there's not really a big woo moment. It doesn't really compete with the Beatles. Anyway.
Nice. Also joining us on today's show is Mike Scopa, a senior feature writer and blogger for allears.net. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, Mike. Hey, Matt. I'm sorry. I want to pass on condolences to Mike and Mary Newell for their loss. Mary lost her father earlier this week, and we pass along our thoughts and wishes to Mary and Mike and Mary's family.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
But on today's show, we're going to be talking about questions you've always wanted to ask about touring plans, but we're too afraid to. We talk about touring plans quite a bit on this show, and certainly if you've been a reader of the Unofficial Guide for many years, then also you're well aware of them. And touring plans are something that I think we always say. You really need a good touring plan for this trip. Or there you go. Thank you, Mike. You need a good touring plan for this, or it would be really great if you guys used a great Epcot touring plan for this day. And a lot of people are kind of hesitant around them because they have questions about it. But of course, you don't want to be like that guy asking the maybe what you perceive to be a stupid question, and certainly not. But we wanted to kind of go over some of the things the aspects of touring plans that maybe you just haven't been willing to, thought about asking before. Because there are some aspects of it that can be a little daunting, to say the least. So, Len, let me start at the top. And let me say, the most common question I say is, why do I really need a touring plan? How much more is it going to help me out?
On a busy day at the Magic Kingdom, which has a lot of attractions and is very popular, you could save as much as 5 hours a day of standing in line. And I think we've talked about this before. The book actually claims 4 hours. That's to give ourselves a little bit of leeway. I think the lawyers actually do that. But we think it's closer to 5.
Now, what about? Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't know.
So, like during a summer day, during Easter, during Christmas, things like that, 5 hours, and proportionally less, depending on how the crowds diminish. In testing the touring plans, we test them all the time, and we test them in a variety of methods. One of the ways that we test the plans is by giving two groups of people a list of attractions. Like one will give one of our touring plans, then another group will give just a list of attractions to Walt Disney World veterans, people who've been to the park more than 20 times, and we'll tell them, look, just you see these attractions in any order you want, in any way you want. So if you all want to split up and go get fast passes and do all that kind of crazy running around, go do it. No one has ever beat an unofficial guide touring plan. The closest anyone's come is within an hour, and that was with some, again, people who essentially split up to check the wait times at every attraction, then ran back together to figure out what to do next, then ran off to the attraction, then ran off to find the wait times for the next attraction, got back together, figured out what to do, and then did that again. No family would actually do that on a trip.
Now, I think what about, I think the follow-up to that question would be, okay, I'm going during a really dead time of the year. I'm going during September, middle of January. Do I need a touring plan? How much more of a difference is that going to make?
Not as much. The thing that we typically tell people is it's hard because Disney's giving out discounts so often now. They're essentially trying to addict you to them, right? They're like a pusher of the discount drug. It's hard to say exactly what days are going to be less crowded. What we tell people is follow a touring plan for the first 4 to 6 steps. If you're essentially walking on everything to that point, you've got all the bottleneck attractions out of the way, things like Dumbo or Toy Story Mania or Expedition Everest. Once you've got those things out of the way, Soarin' and Epcot, once you've got those out of the way, and you see that it's pretty smooth sailing after that, you can skip the plan. For the rest of the morning and then for the afternoon, because by that time you've got all the critical attractions out of the way. So we advise everyone to start cautiously with the touring plan and then figure out whether you need it or not.
Right, because the touring plans are obviously going to help you out most with the most popular attractions, not so much if you want to work in, One Man's Dream, Sounds Dangerous, and Muppet Vision.
Hey, Sounds Dangerous was open last week when we were there.
Yeah, it was very exciting.
that was so funny because
Swan Song.
It was the funny thing, Mike. The funny thing was in the preview queue, in the pre-show queue, they had this little quiz trivia thing going on about ABC TV shows. None of the shows had been on for like 10 years.
Oh my God!
So they were asking questions about the name of the secretary on Spin City. What? What?
It actually was very difficult.
It was unintentionally hard because we didn't remember the shows, let alone the minor characters that were on them. It was great. So
nice.
Wow.
Now, one question that you get a lot, Len, is from people who are saying, okay, well, I'm going to Walt Disney World, but I've got my teenage boys, and I've got other people who can't ride thrill rides, for instance, and how does that factor into touring plans? It's hard. There isn't a touring plan that is good for people who want to experience thrill rides and people who don't want to experience thrill rides. Yeah,
I would say the most common question that we get for which we don't have a touring plan, we've got like 140 touring plans on the website. I think they cover virtually every scenario that we typically get asked. But the most common question that we get for which we don't yet have a touring plan is one where a family's visiting the Magic Kingdom, for example, and they've got tweens or teens that can go on all the thrill rides and parents that want to go on the thrill rides. But children who, because of their height or their age or their disposition or preferences, just don't want to go on the thrill rides. And the question is what kind of touring plan do you come up with then? So, for example, if you've got one day in the Magic Kingdom and you want to see both Dumbo and Space Mountain, Dumbo-like rides and Space Mountain-like rides, how do you do that? And my answer typically depends on the answer to this question. What's going to happen with how are we going to handle the small child who doesn't want to ride the thrill rides? If you're going to do a child swap with the adult, in other words, if the adult wants to ride the thrill rides and is willing to wait in line with the small child, that generally suggests using FastPass and using the child swap and FastPass for certain attractions, and tending a little bit more towards the kid rides early in the morning, because it's easier to get a FastPass for Space Mountain than it is to stand in line for Dumbo, right? then you're really looking at the lower capacity attractions first. You want to get those things out of the way. However, if the child is the small child is going to do something while the other adults or the bigger kids are on Space Mountain. So in other words, if we have to come up with 2 activities concurrently, then that's a different touring plan. Then what we typically try and do is suggest things like the Tomorrowland Speedway, the Astro Orbiters, a couple extra spins around Buzz Lightyear's Space Ranger spin, as activities for the adult and the small child to do while everyone else is riding the ride. And then that's where the use of either Child Swap or FastPass comes in handy for the adult who isn't riding then.
Now let me answer this. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Finding concurrent activities. It's really only a challenge at the Magic Kingdom, because at Epcot, really the only attractions that aren't great for small children are Test Track and Mission Space.
Right.
And it's easy enough to find other things to do, Innoventions, for example, or at the KidCot stops for those 2 attractions. At the studios, really the big couple are Tower of Terror and Rock and Roller Coaster. But again, there's plenty of stuff to do at the studios for that. Playhouse Disney, the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Movie Set Adventure, things like that.
Okay. What do you think? Let me ask you this question. This is more of a Zen-like question for you, Len. What is the which park lends itself most towards a touring plan, and which park lends itself least towards a touring plan?
What do you mean?
Like, yeah, like which park kind of like, is there a park that stands out and say, wow, this is a really great park for touring plans because it makes it's the easiest to kind of implement, versus a park perhaps that isn't so easy to implement because it's not so easy to plan on paper, that kind of an experience. If that
I
makes
think
sense.
the layout of the park, I think would pretty much be the gating factor there, I think.
That's a good point.
So layout and number of attractions are really the big thing. So like World Showcase, there are only 2 ways that you can tour World Showcase, right? Clockwise and counterclockwise. You're not going to swim across the lagoon to go from China to the United Kingdom, for example. That's just crazy.
You can?
I think we'll remember what
Don't tell me what to do, man.
Remember what the authorities said. You shouldn't do it anymore.
I remember that day because they said, "What a way to do it!"
So I think the park that needs the touring plan the most, especially if you're only doing 1 or 2 days in it, is the Magic Kingdom. Mm-hmm. There's so many different things to see, and it's such a popular park that having a touring plan is essential to checking off, to a comprehensive tour. If this is your first trip here, you've only been a small number of times, and you want to see a comprehensive tour in the park, there's no way you can't have a touring plan.
Lynn, does it help that the Fantasyland and Tomorrowland have attractions so close to each other? That makes it kind of helpful too, doesn't it?
It does a little bit. There are a couple of interesting things about that. One is that if you're looking at the distance from like Space Mountain to Peter Pan's Flight, that's still a pretty big hike. The other thing is, did somebody just roll dice there?
Sorry, I've got a gambling ring going on over here.
Playing Yahtzee on the side here. What the heck? The other thing, Mike, though, that's a little bit more psychological is, even though they're close together, people don't like transitioning back and forth between lands. Because it makes them feel like they're backtracking. Even if it's only a 30-second walk, psychologically, going back and forth between the lands is something that we tend to avoid in the touring plans as much as possible. It's because of the feedback that we get around backtracking, whether real or perceived, we generally don't have in the touring plan, we don't have people backtrack in the park unless we think we can save them at least 20 minutes of standing in line. That's sort of like a threshold that we came up with as over time as a team by looking at the response, the survey responses that people give us to the surveys, to the touring plans. Once we hit a threshold of 20 minutes, the number of people who complained about the small amount of backtracking that we did really falls up to the point where nobody really complains about it anymore.
So
I can't remember the last time I actually got a complaint about backtracking in the touring plans.
So do you then, within Tomorrowland and within Fantasyland, the attractions themselves are in close proximity, though. So that, wouldn't you just do one land at a time?
So again, that's the thing. We in the morning we don't, and the reason why is this: it all comes down to how fast the lines build and how long the lines stay throughout the day. And I'll give you an example. If I'm in the morning and I'm an adult, I get to the park in Magic Kingdom at 9 a.m. The critical attractions for me to get through are Space Mountain and Buzz Lightyear. Those wait times are going to be less than 10 minutes early in the morning. Later in the day, they're going to be anywhere from 30 minutes to more than 2 hours, depending on the time of year. However, the wait time for Carousel of Progress and Monsters Laugh For Comedy Club and the TTA and Stitch are going to be relatively constant throughout the day, right? It's going to take quite a bit to move the needle on those. Mm-hmm. What's much more important then is getting to the Fantasyland attractions like Pooh and Pan, which will zoom, and Dumbo especially, which will zoom from a 5-minute wait between 9 and 10 a.m. to 70 minutes or more during the most crowded times of the year. So you're really not saving much by doing the rest of Tomorrowland once you get through those other attractions. At that point, you've got to lock in your savings and move on to Fantasyland and get as many of those bottleneck attractions out of the way as possible.
Let me ask you this question, Len. This is something I think many of our listeners are obviously avid fans of Walt Disney World. They've been there many times, so they're repeat visitors, and certainly with experience comes the maybe the thought pattern. Why should I use a touring plane if I've been to the parks a number of times? And, I kind of know my way around. Certainly I'm not the guy who's pulling out the map and saying, which way is Haunted Mansion right now from where they are? So if I'm a Disney World veteran, I mean, how much will a touring plan help me? Will it help me so much? I mean, why should I, convince me why a touring plan could be to my advantage, even though I know that, you should go ride, Space Mountain first and not stop and go do Pirates of the Caribbean first thing in the morning.
That's a great question, actually. So the way that I use touring plans now, I do comprehensive touring plans once in a while. Basically one day a trip, just to make sure that the touring plans work, because we're always testing the plans. When I'm not using a direct touring plan, like when I went with Hannah a couple weekends ago to the Magic Kingdom, we didn't follow the touring plan step by step, but we knew what favorite attractions we wanted to see. So Hannah loves all of the mountain attractions, and she likes Pirates of the Caribbean. I can't get her to set foot in Fantasyland to save her life. What we did then is we looked at the pattern that the touring plan was suggesting. Tomorrowland first, Frontierland later, and used that to adapt what we wanted to see. So the first thing we did was, when we got to the park at 9 a.m., was get fast passes for Space Mountain. Then we immediately went to ride Big Thunder and Splash Mountain. And then after that, one of the things that Hannah wanted to do was try and find a paintbrush on Tom Sawyer Island. So at 9:45, we were the first people in line for the boat to Tom Sawyer Island. And guess what?
Found a paintbrush.
She found a paintbrush.
Score.
Yeah, I know. So that's that's sort of the and then we went on, Haunted Mansion and did Hall of Presidents and a bunch of other stuff. All of the sort of the secondary attractions, which is what we suggest doing in the touring plan in the middle of the day. So following, knowing how the touring plan works and knowing why we suggest certain lands or certain attractions is helpful, even if you're not going to follow the touring plan. Just understanding how the park fills up and how you can figure that out just by looking at a touring plan is really helpful to anyone.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. So I mean, it's really useful. Like one of the things that you can notice in the touring plan, especially for the Magic Kingdom, is that we have you get to Frontierland basically after you've done the bottleneck attractions in Tomorrowland, Fantasyland, and Liberty Square. But if you're a huge fan of Splash Mountain and Big Thunder Mountain, and you want, and that's the overriding thing for you to do in a particular day, if you're smart, you look at that and realize that the reason why we're not sending you to Frontierland early is because crowds don't really build that early. So you can get in multiple rides to those attractions by knowing that people don't really go there. Same thing with Adventureland, right? If you're a huge Adventureland fan, the reason why we don't have you going to Adventureland till late morning is because it just doesn't fill up then. So you can take advantage of that if you're a fan and go there first thing in the morning.
Makes sense. Cool. Thank you, Len. I think it was pretty helpful, and I hope that some others will find this helpful in terms of their next trips and saying, okay, maybe this is the time we actually try a touring plan because, we were wondering about such and such and didn't want to, do it wrong. I mean, even just to wrap things up here, Len, I mean, even if you did took a touring plan and really butchered it, like you skipped this thing, but you did this one, but then you did this other one, you know what I mean? Like, but as long as there's still like parts of it there that you're following, that's still an improvement over just completely ignoring a touring plan completely, right?
Oh yeah, having a plan, even if you don't follow it, even if you follow half of it, as long as you get the first couple of attractions in and understand sort of the order in which we're asking you to do things. Again, being in the right land at the right time as general advice. That's fantastic. In fact, that's why we keep up with the not a touring plans. They essentially tell you the order in which to visit the lands, not necessarily the attractions.
Nice.
Cool.
Well,
Thanks,
that's
Matt.
it. No problem. That's it for us today. Don't forget that this episode of WDW Today is being sponsored by All-Star Vacation Homes. And, after a couple days in the parks and, beating the crowds like crazy because you've got an awesome touring plan, you're going to say, you know what I really want to do right now? I want to go back to my All-Star Vacation Home and go into my own private pool. That's right. Most All-Star Vacation Homes have private pools, just yours. So the only annoying kids in the pool are your annoying kids. So you can go in there, enjoy it. There's something nice about that, whether it's right in the morning before the kids wake up or in the evening after a long day in the park or even that afternoon break. You have that pool. It's not going to be crowded with other people there. There's not going to be no chairs available. It's all there for you. And the best part, the price. We're not talking about a huge, expensive prices that only Len can pay for. No. It's not. This is something even I can afford, little old me. That's right. In fact, I do. I go there quite a bit. I enjoy All-Star Vacation Homes, so try them out. Visit them online at www.allstarvacationhomes.com. If you want to find our older episodes, read our show notes, or send us your comments, you can visit the WDW Today website at wdwtoday.com. For Len Testa, Mike Scopa, and Mike Newell, I'm Matt Hochberg. We'll see you on the next show.